Hello everybody. This is a little cheat sheet to get you through making your first Excel graph on your own and making sure that it has all the pieces. Keep in mind that I also have these directions written, but I know for some of you it's easier if you can see me work through the steps on the computer. So feel free to pause at any time and work through your graph as I'm doing this as well. Also, please disregard my children and husband in the background. I apologize. So at this point, you should have already put all of your data into the Excel spreadsheet that you downloaded from Canvas. And one of the very first things that you'll see is if you were to type in 3.0 here, we see that we need that significant figure because we have that estimated digit. However, when I hit enter, that 0 goes away. And that is because Excel is very intelligent. So I want to show you first how to change that. And this can actually help you in several different ways, and I'll show you. Go ahead and highlight all the blue cells where we have numbers that we want to change. And then you are going to right click, or for some of you it's like a double click. We're going to come down here and choose Format Cells. And right here you see you have several options. We are going to click on Number, and we know that we want it to go to one decimal place because of that estimated digit. So we're going to go ahead and change that to 1, and watch what Excel automatically does for us. It's going to go through and change everything for us, which is really nice. So now you have correctly reported your numbers to the correct number of significant figures. Let's go ahead and make our graph. We are going to go through again and highlight just the data. Don't highlight anything that has titles in it at this point just yet. We're going to choose Charts, and then I'm going to scroll down until I find, excuse me, wrong one, Scatter. Here we go, Mark Scatter. And now I see, here's my nice little graph of all the points that I had highlighted over here. Now at this point you can do a couple different things. I'm going to go through and work the harder parts first. And key thing to remember is that what we're talking about here is density. And if you remember the formula for density, it's density equals mass divided by volume. So think of this no different than how you would slope. When you find the slope of something, you take the change in y divided by the change in x. And so that'll kind of help you figure out what goes where on your graph. So we've got to force it to do a couple of things now. We're going to highlight our graph, and you know that our graph is highlighted when you see that blue bar around it. Go ahead and right click, and then we are going to choose Select Data. And this is kind of, I'm not going to say the hard part, but this is the part that I want to make sure that pause the video as you need to. So the very first series of data, we are going to call it our pre-1982 pennies. And remember, slope is the change in y over the change in x. Density is mass divided by volume. So what we want is for the slope to represent our density. Well, that means that we need the mass values to be on the y-axis. So I found my y values, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to highlight my mass values, and they're now there. My x values, I want to be the volume, and so I'm just going to make sure, and now I'm going to hit OK. And so right there we see those are all of my pre-1982 values. And again, that's the mass, plotted by over the volume. Now we're going to do the same thing, and we are going to add another, I'll have my chart there. And we're going to go through and select data again. And this time we're going to add a series, and this is going to be our post-1982 pennies. Again, we want our y values to be the mass. So you're going to come over here to post-1982, and you're going to choose the mass of all your post-1982. And then, of course, our x values, we want to be the volume. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK. So now this is really nice because it also labels our series so that I can tell that those blue diamonds represent my pre-1982 pennies and the red squares represent my post-1982 pennies. And again, remember, your mass is being plotted on the y-axis and your volume is being plotted on the x-axis. Can you guys please go see Daddy in another room?
Well, we're just checking to see if everything was clean.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's go to the next step, and we are going to click up here on Chart Layout, and let's add a trend line. So here we are, and we want a linear trend line. And we see we're actually going to have a trend line for both, but let's just start with the pre-1982. And there's our pretty little trend line. And let's go ahead and add one for the other. And we're going to choose one for the post 1982 pennies as well. So now I've got that trend line, which means I have really good looking data. And please keep in mind, these numbers are totally fictitious. I did not actually measure those. Yeah, I didn't bring a graduated soul here home. So let's continue on. Next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to click on the trend line, right click, and hit Format Trend Line. Here's where my math people are going to love this. Next, click on Options. And right down here, we want to display equation on chart. We're going to set that intercept to 0 and then hit OK. And let's do the same thing for the other one. Go ahead and right click it, Format Trend Line, Options, Display Equation on Chart, and we're going to go ahead and set that intercept to 0 and hit OK. So at this point, you're like, okay, why in the world does that matter? Well, this is going to automatically calculate the density for us. That slope right there, that is representing what the average density is of these 4 points. So I can see that for this data, my pre-1982 penny is showing me a density of 0.7875. And up here, my post-penny density is 2.0529. And again, we're not going to worry about sig figs on those densities, but I do want you to see how that can definitely work in your favor, and we don't have to go through and do any calculations because Excel has done it for us. The last thing that we're going to do is we know that for a graph, we always have to have a title. So we're going to go ahead and add a title above the chart, and you choose whatever you want to name that. And the next part of this graph I am very picky on because, again, in honors chemistry, it's the details we're looking at. We're going to choose axis titles, and let's go ahead and we're going to title our x-axis first. Key thing to remember, your x-axis, first of all, is representing the volume, but please don't forget to include what units those numbers are representative of. If you just write volume, is it volume centimeters cubed? Is it volume in liters? Is it volume in meters cubed? It could be anything, so it's so important to include those units. And then let's go ahead and add a y-axis, which we understand that the y-axis is representative of the mass and that is measured in grams. So now, you saw that took me not very long at all, and I have a nice graph showing all the data that I need. Before you copy and paste it over into your lab report, I would come down here and just kind of double check, make sure that you have all these things. I actually need to change that. Make sure that you have all of these things in the rubric so that you can achieve your full points for your graph. Guys, that's it. Again, go back, play the video again, pause the video as you need, and let me know what questions you have.